All right. Well, it says I'm live. I'm not seeing that I'm live anywhere. Let's see if I can pull this up here. Hey, there it is. Good evening, everybody. Well, all one person that's watching right now. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Always got to do my sound check here in the beginning, just to make sure that my audio is good to go. Actually, I guess I could just unmute my own laptop here. Good to go? Yep, we're good. Just unmute my own laptop here. Yep, we're good. All right. So as we're waiting on people to jump in, I've got a decent amount of questions, and I apologize. I don't know what it is. I feel like my allergies are acting up or something. I'm like super congested today for some reason. So if you hear me sniffling a lot, that is the reason why, and I apologize in advance. Let's bring this down a little bit. Might be good. Will, what's up, man? Hello, hello. All right, so I see people are, excuse me, starting to jump in. So, hello, everybody. I apologize for not doing a live in a very long time. For those of you that don't know, I'm active duty Army, and some of you guys do know that. And I've been away for, I've been back for a couple of weeks now, but I've kind of just been taking a little bit of a break, trying to enjoy time with the family. I was gone for a total of about 7 weeks. We had to go down to Fort Bliss, Texas, to do a mobilization for a National Guard unit that was getting ready to head overseas. So I was gone for a decent amount of time, and that went pretty good. It was unfortunate because, you know, obviously I missed being away from all the social media stuff the way that I have been in recent years, I guess. But now that COVID is actually starting to kind of die down a little bit in terms of, I think people are willing to accept a little bit more risk, and then people are getting the vaccination, and businesses are starting to open back up. Well, with that, the Army is starting to pick back up, specifically being my job. So unfortunately, it is changing the schedule that I've been used to for the last year. So with that being said, one of the things that I did want to do while I was gone is I absolutely wanted to do lives and everything. But we were actually in a hotel while we were there for those 7 weeks. And the internet connection in that hotel is one of the worst I've ever had, period. It actually took, you know, a few hours to upload a video, is where at my house it would take 1 or 2 minutes. So it just really was not a great situation to do any kind of lives, excuse me, or anything like that. So with all that being said, I'm back in the shop. I'm super glad to be back in the shop. Haven't really done too much since I've been back, just some small things. I've been messing with the CNC a little bit. I did rearrange the shop just a little bit, rearranged a couple of things in the shop. If you guys have been following me over on Instagram, you've probably seen those changes. But overall, I'm just happy to be back, to be honest with you. I've got just under 2 years left in the Army. And in reality, I have about 15 more months of doing regular Army things with my job. And then after that, I'll start an internship and kind of be going through the retirement process. So I'm almost there. I'm not quite there, but I'm almost there. And I'm super excited that I am almost there, so then I can kind of dedicate all my time towards this, which is what I really want to do. All right, so I see some people are in here. Not a lot tonight, probably because I haven't been on here in quite some time. But if you guys have questions, just leave them down here. I did want to get on here and highlight some of the questions that I've gotten since before I left. So some of these questions actually go back to February. I don't have a ton, but I've got a decent amount. So I'm just going to kind of jump right into it and start going through some of these questions that I was asked. And hopefully those people that wrote me those questions prior to me going down to Fort Bliss will get a chance to see this later on. And for those of you that don't know, if you guys ever have any questions, not only can you leave them down here in the comments section on the live, but feel free to go over to my website, and there's actually a little form at the top of the page. It's highlighted in blue. If you ever have recommendations for YouTube videos, or you just want a question for me to answer here on this live, then that's the place to go do it, because it gives me the opportunity to actually just print out any questions that I haven't answered, and it just makes it really easy for me. So, Leather by Dragonfly. Glad you're back doing live. You and me both. All right, so I can't remember exactly where I left off last time, but as I was reading through some of these, I remember answering them on the last live. So I'm going to go with where I think I left off. And the first question is actually from one of my Patreon supporters. I do have a Patreon. I always give them priority, but it's Marty Gable. And he actually left me a couple of messages, and they both have to do with my Hammer A341. So I'm going to start with those, and then I'm going to go through. So it says, "Hi, Jason. I love your Hammer A341 video, but now I'm second guessing my decision to order mine with the metric digital gauge. Curious why you paid extra for the imperial gauge. I thought we were all on this metric journey together." So I didn't even think about it when I ordered it. And I have a deal with Hammer. Basically, when I ordered the machine, we kind of talked about it. We were going to do the entire thing, and then they ended up sending the imperial gauge. Here's the thing, though. It's imperial and metric. I don't know if there is even a separate imperial one and a separate metric one. The gauge has both. It'll tell you what the imperial is and then what the equivalent each turn is in metric. I don't worry myself with it too much. I kind of just look at the scale. The scale is also imperial and metric. But for the most part, when I installed it, I put stuff on there. I would use my calipers, and I would basically adjust the digital readout. They say digital, but it's not really digital. I would adjust that readout to match the thickness of the thing that I was putting through. So really good example, 3/4 inch material. I would use my calipers until I knew it was exactly 3/4 of an inch. And then I would set that, and then I would place it back inside of the wheel. And then I knew everything was calibrated. From there, I don't really get wrapped around the axle about having that exact perfection. I actually will use the calipers in a lot of cases to get exactly how thick I want it to get. Yeah, I can just reference the gauges and everything like that really quick. But I usually have my digital calipers with me, and if I'm getting close, I'll usually just pull them out of my little pouch or my apron, and I'll do a quick check to see what it is. The other question that he had about the A341, now that I have my new A341, I am curious if you would recommend getting the bed extensions, and if so, holy cow, let me turn that off. That's been on for days. That's the bad thing about having one of these switches for your air compressor and it being so quiet. Now that I have my A341, I'm curious if you would recommend getting the bed extensions, and if so, one or two. I do very similar project types as you. Marty, I have the in-feed and out-feed support tables. I still have not installed them on the A341. When I had the A326, I absolutely put them on there, and it was great because the beds are a lot shorter. These beds are a lot longer, so I haven't found the need to do it. I would say get two, and for me, I always ran one on the in-feed side of the jointer, and I ran one on the out-feed side of the planer. And then if I ever needed an out-feed for the jointer or something like that, I just pop it off of the planer, put it on the outfeed, and then when I needed to go to the planer, I would just take it off and plop it on there. That's the one thing that's really great about it, is that it's really, really, really easy to change over. You just loosen a little lockdown mechanism on the bottom, you pull it off, plop it on the rail, good to go. I have two. I still have not even mounted them on my machine yet because I haven't actually found the need to do it yet. I want to say you have about 40 inches or so in-feed and out-feed support, and I haven't done anything 8 feet in length in a very long time. I actually always try to cut my pieces down to more manageable sizes in the first place to do that. So hopefully that helps, and if not, just shoot me a message off of this live, and we can talk about it more. All right, so The next one I got was from Derek Bruflot. Probably saying that wrong. He wrote like a really long thing talking about like how he got into woodworking and all that stuff. So Derek, I apologize. I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit because it's pretty long. So I'm going to jump down to where he has this question. It says, so my question for you is, and I'm sorry, I'm real quick. I'm looking on here. Yeah, if you guys have questions, please leave them in there. Once I get through these, I'll go back and answer those. I'm trying to figure plywood to buy for cabinets. I want to pin down a plywood for smooth white MDF or melamine, or if we want to go stain for the sets. Seems like Baltic birch is a popular option for a lot of YouTube videos, but I can't seem to find it anywhere near me. Okay, so, and he goes on, he writes a bunch more stuff. And Derek, thank you so much for what you did right. I do appreciate it. But here's what I'm going to tell you. Baltic birch is great for shop projects and carcass construction. Realistically, you could use that because the only thing you ever see on a cabinet is the inside only when you open the door. Baltic birch is a great option. If you can't get that, that's not a deal breaker though, by any means. When it comes to picking what you want, if you're going to paint it, a maple ply is really good. Poplar ply is really good. Really, any ply, you theoretically could paint it. I wouldn't go down the cheap route of like sanded pine ply or something like that. But a maple, matter of fact, I've done a lot of stuff with just birch ply, not Baltic birch, but just birch ply. I've had really good results with that. And a lot of those things are very accessible at your local home store. People get wrapped around the axle. If you're building cabinets, you don't have to have this perfect high grade cabinet. Let me give you an example. I'm getting ready to build 2 vanities, and I'm going to build, they're both exactly the same size. They're a dual vanity. They're 72 inches wide. I'm going to build them higher than the ones that are in there, but they're like 20 inches deep, 20 or 22 inches deep, 72 inches wide. The imperial measurements for you guys. And which is really a standard basic, home building size, right? If you have a double vanity, a double sink vanity, it's probably going to be around the 72 inch mark. It's a fairly common size, right? With that, I'm going to go buy plywood, but I'm going to buy finished on one side plywood, right? Whether it's maple or birch or whatever they have realistically. I want it to be finished on one side, and the side that I need the finish to be on is the inside of the cabinet. I could care less what the outside of the cabinet looks. Why? Because you're never going to see it. Then on top of that, I'm going to put a face frame, and I'm going to build my own doors and drawer fronts, and everything is going to be white oak. And in this case, I'll probably be using rift sawn white oak. So it doesn't matter what the box is made out of. When you open it up, if you want to save time on finishing the interior side of the cabinet, then get plywood that's finished on one side. So when you open it up, boom, it's already finished. It just saves you time. But realistically, whatever you want to look at when you open your cabinets, that should be your answer. I wouldn't be building doors out of plywood. I wouldn't be building drawer fronts out of plywood unless you were like edge banding them somehow. So if you're going to be using hardwood or something like that for the fronts, or even if you're using the plywood, if you're going down the stain option, you have to have the plywood with whatever hardwood, it has to match. So for instance, if you wanted to use oak for your drawer fronts and you were going to stain everything and you wanted the interior to match, then obviously you would want to get oak plywood so you could stain that and it would be a close match to the hardwood that you're using on the outside, if that makes sense. So really just look around. Plywood prices are really expensive right now. I mean, all lumber prices are relatively expensive right now. Baltic birch is going to be on the cheaper side, and if you are okay with the Baltic birch look on the inside of the cabinet, then get Baltic birch. If it's not available in your area, look for standard birch, or look for maple, or look for poplar, or look for whatever. As long as you like the way it looks when you open up that cabinet, that's really all that matters. And if you're painting the inside of the cabinet, it really doesn't make any difference at all. Okay. I see some questions coming in on the chat. I will get to those here shortly. Chris Chen, saw your video on imperial versus metric. I'm pretty sold on metric as well, but sometimes it's just easier to visualize dimensions in imperial. What marking tools do you now have in metric versus imperial? That's his first question. Do you intend to go 100% metric, or do you still mix both, especially when making decisions on woodpecker stuff? So to answer your first questions, what marking tools do you now have metric versus imperial? Tape measures. I have imperial and then imperial and metric combos. In terms of measuring tools now, like I was talking about the digital calipers earlier, right? These are great because you can do imperial or metric. You can do fractions, decimal, or metric. So that's really handy. In my laser that I use for different things, especially when I'm doing home interior stuff, trying to get measurements, this is both fraction, decimal, and metric. And that's what the reason I'm bringing those both up is because the majority of the things that you're going to buy nowadays are going to be a combo. Unless you're just going to like Home Depot and you're buying a Stanley Fat Max tape measure and it's only imperial, right? Because not a lot of people that are going to Home Depot are looking for metric stuff. I use fast cap tape measures. So this is the one I was just talking about. The blue, it's only metric, and this is on the 32 millimeter system. And let me see if hopefully it'll go here. There's a little bit of a delay. Yeah, it's kind of, if you can see the diamonds that are on there, like between 60 and 70, it's on 64, right? So 64 is a multiple of 32. So if you're somebody that's building cabinets on the 32 millimeter system, this is great. And this is only metric, period. There is no combo. Here, this is a metric and standard, the yellow fast cap. And this one right here, I find very helpful. I use all of them, right? Because I'm not 100% metric, right? I still do visualize and take rough measurements in imperial. It's because it's what I'm so used to. Any chance I get to use metric, I'm using metric. But to get an idea, I still know, you know, if I'm saying 72 inches, I know what that looks like in my head as opposed to the metric equivalent to that. I just still don't know off the top of my head, but I'm getting there. This also has those diamonds that I was telling you about. If it'll focus here, you can see them like there. Yep, cool. So I like that. In terms of the actual like layout tools and stuff, that means nothing to me except for I have an Inker Tiny T, which I now have the metric version of that. I have the Woodpecker's Pellini rulers, which are both metric and imperial. Matter of fact, yeah, they're both metric and imperial. If I can buy something that is both metric and imperial, I will absolutely buy it. Everything else that I have woodpeckers is all imperial, but it means nothing to me because I don't use any of those things to measure. It's usually like I'm using it as a straight edge to draw a straight line. I'm using it to check square. I'm never using a square to mark measurements ever. So the fact that those are not metric doesn't really bother me. I only have 2 woodpeckers tools minus the Pellini rulers. I'm looking at them right now, which is why I'm looking in this direction. I had the TS24. I now have the TS600 because that comes in very handy when I'm doing drawer slide installation and I'm laying out my lines for drawer slides. And then the other is the 1281, and that's because my wife bought it for me for Christmas a long time ago, and she bought me the metric version because my wife is German and she knows that I like metric, and she is awesome. So, but other than that, I've never used that 1281 to ever do any kind of measurement. I have only used that to check square on something. So I don't get wrapped around the axle about that. I'm not like rushing out to trade in my tools to do that. I still do use both. And that goes along with your second question. Do you intend to go 100% metric, or you still do a mix of both, especially when making decisions on woodpecker stuff? The tools that I get, it means nothing because most woodpecker stuff is combo, right? You can get it in both. So if I can get it in both, I'm going to get it in both just because it gives me that opportunity. Do I really use those things for that? Not really. Adam Peck. Can you do a quick tour of how you have your WCR set up? So what he's talking about is, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get most of it in the camera here. Let me bring this down a little bit. He's talking about the little work center setup that I have. So I used to have the boom arm. I know a lot of people knew that. But then I decided I wanted to go out and buy this and give this a shot for a while because I got a lot of questions about it, but I could never answer the question. I don't really have any crazy setup on this, to be honest with you. I keep my mask on here. I keep some of the pocket screws, just stuff that I'm using on a project I keep here. And I don't really drag this around with me throughout the shop. It kind of just stays off to the side because the hose I have is so long, I'm able to do what I need to do. On the back side, I've got the square that I have from Bench Dogs UK for the tracks. And there's some hooks on the back side, but I even have some hooks up here. Really, it's whatever I happen to maybe be using on that project, but I don't have anything crazy. My biggest want for this was having the ability to like lay stuff on here as I'm using it. If I had it right next to me, it still stays pretty stationary for the most part. I have been thinking about getting one of these right here and actually putting it on the top. And the reason I've been thinking about doing that is because maybe for a specific project, the things that I use most common, it might be kind of nice to have one of these on there. But again, that stays stationary over against that wall, and the hose is long enough to where I don't really have to worry about moving it all that much. So I haven't been super concerned about, you know, like having everything that I need on it at all times. Most of the stuff that I need is all on the table. Here's what I will say. I really do like that a lot because I don't have to worry about the extension of the boom arm. I still loved the boom arm assembly and it was great, but it was way better in my last shop the way that I had it set up. In this shop, it just doesn't really set up the way that I would want it to. If I could go back to having it the way I had it in my last shop, I would, but unfortunately I can't the way that this shop is set up. So I do really like this. It's nice. I can pull it around. I've got the really long hose on there, so it works really good. Brian Olson. Excuse me, I'm getting a dry throat here. I have to replenish myself with Michelob Ultra, the superior light beer. Hashtag not sponsored. Although I wish I was, because I'd spend a lot of money on that stuff. Brian Olson. I'm looking to outfit my wood shop with a jointer and a planer, and find myself attracted to the jointer-planer combos due to space-saving qualities, but I have a decent-sized shop that could potentially accommodate both separately. If you had, this is a great question. We've talked about it before. If you had a larger shop, would you still have the combo machine, or do you think it would be better to have separate machines if space allowed? Robert, what's up, man? So it's difficult for me to answer. And this isn't because I have any kind of ties to Hammer. I don't. I really, really, really like my A341. I have 16 inches of jointing and 16 inches of planing capacity in one machine, in one footprint. However, if I had the space, yes, I would probably still want two separate machines just because it would alleviate the need to switch over between the two. Now, with that being said, if I was to move to a much larger shop, what I would consider doing is keeping my A341 and using it as a 16-inch jointer only, and then, getting a separate planer. But the reason I feel like that's silly at this point is because the planer is the planer. I can go buy a 15-inch planer or 20-inch planer for less money than what it costs for that. But I cannot go buy a 16-inch jointer for less money than I paid for that has the capacity of both. And it is a phenomenal machine. But if space was not an issue, of course it would be great to go from one straight into the other and not have to worry about switching it over. Now, if I'm just milling lumber for a project and I don't have to go back and remill anything, it is no problem at all because I'm always going to joint all of my boards first, then I'm going to plane all of them. Where it comes into a problem is when, let's say I don't mill up a little bit of extra. Let's say that I screw something up and I have to mill 2 more boards. Then when you have to go through that process, that's when it's like, ugh, man, why didn't I just mill up more in the first place? Other than that, the changeover takes less than a minute. The machine is fantastic. The quality is incredible. And the simple fact that I have 16 inches of joining capacity is unbelievable. Have I used 16 inches yet? No. Will I ever? Probably not. But if I had the space, and space was not an issue, having two separate machines obviously would be great, because that's a little bit of time that you're saving. So we'll see. We're actually in the process right now of talking to a home builder, and our plans for staying in this house for 5 years at a minimum are probably going to, be accelerated quite rapidly. Nothing is set in stone yet, but this may not be the shop of Bent's Woodworking for too much longer. Excuse me, definitely not for 5 years, that's for sure. Brian Fry, I made a coffee table out of cherry, and I'm going to use Rubio for the first time. Any tips or tricks? What I would tell you is, if you haven't seen my video on how to apply Rubio Monocoat, I would absolutely suggest that. It'll tell you everything you need to know about putting it on. Cohen Shunkin, hello, do you send merchandise, clothing to the Netherlands? I do not ship my clothing and stuff. It's from the company, and I do not know if they ship to the Netherlands. Mary Beth Johnson asked, does the rail square serve the same function as the MFT3? It seems like the primary function of both is 90 degree cuts. Am I thinking about this correctly? If yes, which would you opt for? Or if no, please explain. So to answer your question, yes, to an extent. A track square like this, right? I'm going to show you my favorite one, because I love the TSO products one the most. This on a rail is 100% designed to give you a 90 degree cut, because this right here references your clean cut edge, therefore giving you a 90 degree cut when you're making your cut based off of the reference edge. An MFT3, same principle. You have a fence, you have a rail that comes down, and it gives you that 90 degree cut from the fence. So instead of having that track that you're attaching to it, you're pushing the piece of wood into the fence, and now you have a track that comes down, which is perfectly 90 if you set it up properly, to the fence. So when you make the cut, yes, you have a perfect 90. The benefit that the MFT has over that is that the MFT, you can do multiple different angles. You can set that head to cut, anywhere from 90 to, I don't even know how low down it goes. I don't have one handy, but you can cut multiple angles, and it has all these detents. So think of like a miter gauge that is also a square, that is also a track, right? That you can adjust and do all these things. Depends on what you want to do, right? So a track and a square is a great option when you have really large pieces that are over the capacity of the MFT. So let me give an example of where I would use this versus setting up my crosscut station using the pivoting arm and all that other stuff. I'm gonna use this probably a lot more when I have just like onesies and twosies cuts, right? So I think a better way to explain this would be, let me explain to you the way that I would build a kitchen, right? If I was gonna build a bunch of cabinets, I would rip everything first. Every single piece would be ripped. Once everything was ripped to the width that I want it to be, then I'm gonna transition into cross-cutting. When I have a lot of pieces like that, I'm absolutely gonna take the time to set up my table, which essentially is just one gigantic MFT, and I'm gonna do all of my cross-cuts on this station. If I'm cutting one panel to be the back of a credenza, I just did an Instagram post on this. I'm gonna use this. I'm not gonna go through all the trouble to set up my table to make those cuts, when I can just grab this. I can rip one edge, I can use my parallel guides, make sure everything's great, get my width, and then I'm gonna make two cuts. I'm gonna make one on one end with this to get a nice clean edge, and then I'm gonna go to the other side, I'm gonna measure, and I'm gonna use this. It gives me a perfect 90. So they both have a place. just a single MFT, one MFT setup, you do have a lot of limitations. And those limitations are obviously based on how big the pieces that you're cutting are. This right here, you really don't have any limitations whatsoever. As long as you have a long enough track and you have this, you'll be able to get 90-degree cuts, no problem. So hopefully that answered your question. John Benz would love to learn how to cut small pieces of wood using the MFT and a TS55. Thank you. I will probably do something like that in the future for a YouTube video. And again, I do see the questions that are coming in. I appreciate it, and I promise I'm going to get to those. I think I've only got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more questions here, and then I'll start getting into these ones. Harold Canning, Jason, I just watched your very informative video on the Harvey G700. And I see a couple questions about the G700 in here. Page 11 of the operations manual states the machine should be at least 18 inches away from the wall to ensure motor heat dissipation. It appears to me that you have it in the corner. Is it actually 18 inches from the wall? My potential application is also in a corner, and I do not have the 18 inches. Do you think I should not, or I should therefore not consider the G700 as my dust collector? Darn, I really like the beast. Please help. I wouldn't worry about it. Harold, and I'm sorry, I see that you said, I'm hoping that you will email me back. I wish I would have seen this before. Maybe I will email you tonight. But if you're watching this, Harold, if you're in here, to answer your question, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Because I'll tell you right now, I do not have mine 18 inches away, and I have not had any issues whatsoever. That was kind of a concern for me too. I would say I might have mine a total of 10 inches or so. And I actually have some things behind the machine as well. But there has been absolutely zero issues. I really don't think it's a problem. That's probably just a minimum requirement. They say, hey, have it this far away. I knew I couldn't do that in the space that I have, so I didn't do it, and I haven't had any issues. I don't even think I ever have the machine running long enough for it to really get hot anyways. Charles Mogi, did you delete your camera stand video? And I thought about this when I saw this. It was on my old channel, and the Bent's Woodworking and more, and then I combined the two channels into this, so it is no longer on there. However, if you want to find out more information about how I built mine, it's just based off Jay Bates' design, and he has a video and an article about it on his website. Okay. Rob Graham is a retired Navy officer. I didn't think that I would ever enjoy listening to anyone from the Army as much as I enjoy listening to you. Thank you for your service and the great content, Rob. Thank you so much, Rob, and same to you. Karen Savard, 2 more questions. Karen Savard, I tried extensively and unsuccessfully to find all of the tools necessary for filling large knot holes in wood. I require the gun, glue sticks, the cooling tool, or the pressure tool, plus a knife. I live in a small community in Alberta, Canada. I have visited your website, and it appears that you may have these tools available. Any assistance you can offer? Okay, now that I'm reading this, I remember speaking to this individual, and I guess they thought that I was like a vendor for the Rangate like glue gun, essentially, that you can fill the knot filling system that I've used a few times. And I actually reached out to her and answered that question for her. So I'm going to move on to the last question. Beginner woodworker. I just watched your YouTube video on building a simple drawer. I am confident enough that I am going to start my first drawer tomorrow. I do have one question for you. Why use an MDF bottom instead of a plywood bottom? I intend for the drawer to hold 50 pounds or more. Could you drop me a short email when you get a chance? Man, I really got to do a better job looking at these things. David Crook, if you were in here, or you see this later, it really just depends on the application. If you're putting 50 pounds in it, I would probably use 1/2-inch ply for the bottom. I think for that video, I just used that. For a lot of kitchen applications, typically I'll use 1/4 inch just because, I mean, what are you really putting in a drawer in a kitchen that weighs that much? Anything I do in the shop, I'm typically using 1/2 inch. And even lately, I've actually transitioned quite a bit to using 1/2 inch Baltic birch for everything. The sides, the bottom, it just makes it really, really easy. So hopefully you probably built the drawer, because I'm pretty sure you sent that message back in like 3 weeks ago. So, okay. Now, let me see what questions I have and see who is in here. Peter Woolworth, first visit here live. Thank you for your service. Thank you so much, Peter. Good evening from the Bahamas. I need to go to the Bahamas. Ashley, Monday meetup by Woodwork and Whiskers. Ash, you know he has not done a live for a while when the air compressor comes on. Yeah, you ain't lying. Don Sargood, with your recommendation, I purchased the Harvey dust collector and love it. Now I need to purchase the ductwork. Where did you get your Nordfab ductwork? It seems like the right way to go. Thanks. So Don, to answer your question, I went through a company called, man, now it's slipping my mind. What the heck was the name of it? I cannot remember. I just talked to Keith Johnson about this the other day. It's going to drive me nuts. Now I feel like I need to look it up. So here's what I'll tell you. If you're still in here, Don, if you go to my video where it's the first video I did, the part of the shop series, down in the video description, I put the link to the company that I went through. It's out of Colorado. They are a Nordfab distributor, and the only reason I went with them originally is because somebody that is a Nordfab vendor, I think that works for this company, is a subscriber on YouTube or a follower on Instagram, and they wrote me a message and said, hey, when you're ready to buy it, let me know. I work with this company, and we're one of the biggest manufacturers, or the biggest wholesalers. Dang it, it's driving me nuts. Now I really need to try to remember what it is. Oh, gosh. Anyways, go to that video, and down in the bottom, I have the email to the point of contact that I had there. It's, AirPro. I think it's AirPro of Denver. AirPro of Denver. I believe it's that. I don't know why I cannot remember. I just had this conversation the other day. But to avoid wasting any more time, if you go to that video, I believe it's AirPro Denver. And there's an email down in the video description, and you can send them an email and talk to them, and it's a great way. Another thing that I would recommend, I love the Nordfab. It is fantastic. But to be completely fair, there are a lot of companies that manufacture aluminum or this steel or whatever different materials they have. This is aluminum. I believe it's aluminum. Yeah, metal. No, it's not aluminum. It's rolled steel. Metal ductwork, right? Nordfab is not the only company, and there are other options out there that are actually a little bit less expensive and are probably just as good. John at AirPro Denver. I just remembered it. John at AirPro Denver. Go to that video. The information's down in the video description. You can find it there. But from Alabama Woodworker, he contacted me asking me about where I got my Nordfab, and he went through the process, and then he actually found another company somewhere on the East Coast that makes a similar product, and he got it, and he loves it. And to be honest with you, it looks exactly the same. So definitely look around out there. There's some other great companies, so you don't necessarily have to go with Nordfab. Nordfab, I think, is just the most well-renowned, well-known. I didn't know of any other companies when I did it, and I had a really good opportunity, so I went with the Nordfab. So hopefully that answers your question. Reynaldo Russell, what's the difference between Baltic birch and just birch ply? Well, just birch ply is more of a birch veneer. Baltic birch traditionally means that it is a multi-core, thin layer. It's like usually like 11 or 12 ply or 13 ply. It has a much thicker veneer than other plywoods that I've used, and it's typically something that comes from like the Baltic region. So it is very specific to that area. I really like Baltic birch. Birch ply, though, is going to give you a very similar look, but it's not the same internal components, right? So birch ply, I bought some at Northwest Lumber not too long ago, and I use it. It's fantastic. It works great. Baltic birch is going to be a little bit more stable than other plywoods because of the multiple layers that are inside of it. So there's a lot of benefits of Baltic birch. I really like Baltic birch a lot for drawers, And I think when I rebuild my miter saw station and some of the other shop furniture that I have, I'm probably going to go with Baltic birch. Um, Ash asks, given the increase in cost of ply, is MDF suitable for drawer carcass in an area that is not exposed to weather? I think that not exposed to weather, sure. I mean, there's in Europe using MDF for not just Europe. That's an ignorant statement. Even in the States, but more so in Europe, probably. Closets, built-ins, kitchens, all kinds of stuff are all built primarily out of MDF or MDF-like materials. So everything has its pros and cons. Just like, people hate on melamine and because it's a particle board core and it's cheap and there's a lot of things that will last you a very long time using melamine. It's just a lower price point. There wouldn't be different price points on materials if there wasn't a need in the market for different price points of materials. So I don't know if I would necessarily probably use it on a drawer, just because a drawer is something that's constantly getting pulled and stuff. I think there might be better options out there like plywood. But for a cabinet carcass, I think, yeah, why not? You're not putting a ton of stress on it. It's going up there and it's sitting there. Where you'll run into problems is like the screws that hold the hinges in and all that kind of stuff. That could present problems in the long run. But there's a market for everything, and there's different uses for everything. Rob, I said hello to you. Kevin's Woodcraft. Hey, Jason, how's your weekend? It's going really good. Today was fantastic. This morning, my wife and I and my son went up to Carmel, Indiana. They have a farmer's market. We went and met Sedge and his wife and our friend Rick and his wife up there, and we shopped around a little bit. I did buy 2 New York strip steaks for $64 because they are Wagyu, however you say it, beef. And we've wanted to try it. So I was like, you know what? Let's do it. So tomorrow I'm going to be making Wagyu beef New York strips. Hopefully your weekend is going good as well. Scott K, new G700, and I am paranoid about ingesting chunks of wood into the impeller. The guard out on the front should stop larger chunks, but something about 3/4 by 3/4 should get through that and bang into the impeller. I almost want to put a separator out in front of the machine. CFM will suffer. Also, it looks like the impeller is protected with a plastic piece. Is this by design or to keep the impact down? That I don't know. The second thing is I never let it bother me very much because I never used a floor sweep. When I first moved into the shop, I was using the dust collector, and I had a bunch of very, very, very thin remnants of plywood because I was ripping things down to final size, and the leftover was, when you cut plywood on the edge and it's like so thin, the offcut, that like it's not a full piece of plywood. It's just like basically strings of plywood. So I put everything in a pile, and I used my hose like I would do in my last shop, and I started to suck everything up. And for like the next day, I was like, why is my dust collector, why does it seem like it's really straining and it's not very effective? And I was like, I just don't understand. Like, did this suction go down? I was actually really worried about it. I'm like, what is going on with this dust collector? Well, come to find out, I have the Nordfab, so it's easy to just unclip it and take sections of it off. So I took the section that comes out of the machine itself. I just unclipped it real quick, popped it off. It turns out that guard that you're talking about, the metal X, type piece that stops anything big from going in there, had caught all of those strands of plywood, and they were basically blocking the inlet. And so for the first part of me was like, oh, I'm really glad that happened because, now it stopped that stuff from getting sucked in the machine. But at the same time, it also told me, hey, if I ever notice a drop in suction on my machine, I probably need to go check that to see if I did that. Since that day, I have then no longer utilized my hoses and stuff in the shop to suck up large piles of dust. And there's 2 benefits that I find of that. Is one, one, my shop stays pretty clean as it is because I'm kind of OCD about that kind of stuff. And I tend to sweep up the shop and clean up the shop every day that I work in here and actually get a bunch of stuff on the floor. It's just the way that I am. I like to be in a clean space. So what I do is I just sweep it into a pile and then just put it in a dustpan and put it in the trash. And to me, that actually makes more sense because now I'm not filling up my bags with a bunch of stuff from the shop. So typically speaking, that's what I do. If you do put a separator in front of it, you absolutely will lose CFM. You will. I don't know how much. I can't say that because I haven't done it. But you're going to lose CFM. Anytime you add anything that the air has to go through, you're going to lose CFM. So I probably wouldn't do that. I would probably just change the way that you go about cleaning up any major stuff in your shop. To me, the bottom line is, think about it like this. If you're going to sweep everything up into a pile to then suck it up into your machine, you're still going to sweep it up into the pile. So sweep it up into the pile and then just use a dustpan and put it in the trash. And not only is it going to save space inside of your dust collector, which is already smaller than traditional bags, but it's just as fast. So that's just something that I would recommend. That's something that I did. I sweep it up into a pile anyway. I might as well just take my dustpan and then throw it in the trash. The good news is that the machine works really well, so hopefully you shouldn't have a bunch of stuff laying all over the shop. Patrick, my G700 is not 18 inches away and it works just fine. It never runs for long periods of time. I've had mine run for a long period of time with the CNC machine, but still, I've never had any issues. Al, hey Jason, sorry to be late. Good to see you. Good to see you, Al. Christopher Ronk, any thoughts on Milwaukee's pack-out storage system? I don't have any thoughts about it. I know lots of companies do that now, and I mean, a bunch of companies just made their own version of what Festool's already created, and a lot of them are very, very nice. I know DeWalt has one. I know Milwaukee has one. I mean, Thanos, not Thanos. We're not talking about the Avengers here, but Thanos, which is it's the same company that makes the Festool Sustainers. They have their whole line along with the Festool line, and I want to say that like even Cobalt I've seen has something similar. I think they're all great. I think Milwaukee's is probably the most robust next to Festool, but I would say that about their entire tool line. I was actually asked by Home Depot a little while back if I wanted to be a part of a promotional thing, promoting Milwaukee tools, and I actually turned it down just because the tools that were being promoted as part of that are all direct competitors and things that I already have from Festool. So I personally, myself, I just didn't think that was super right. So I didn't do that. So unfortunately, I don't have a ton of experience with that. Rodney Widger, hello, my friends from Branson, Missouri. Hello. Gary, how are you? I haven't talked to you in a long time. Reef GC sweeping will create airborne dust, though. Yeah, it will, but I mean, so does everything that you do in your shop. I mean, I don't know, like there's only so many things that you can do. I think people have this unattainable goal of making this perfectly dust-free shop. And I honestly just don't believe, I have a pretty good setup with my dust collection, and is it perfect? No, it is not. Is my shop, does not have a layer of dust? That's a common misconception that people have, is like, if you look at the background behind me, like it looks really nice. So you can even see it because I'm looking at the computer screen now. There is a layer of dust on everything. Like you'll be able to see this. So I'm going to take this shelf right here, and you can see it right now. So there is a layer of dust, and it's going to be noticeable now. You can see the line, right? There is a layer of dust on everything, so nothing is ever going to be perfect. But I do take whatever steps that I can to, try to make it as good as I can. Well, what I will tell you is that this is the best it's ever been in my shop, and then I added one of the air filtration systems that helps with that. So the way I look at it is you really have to kind of sweep it up, unless you have one of those like Rockler, like, what is it called? Those, I have one, or I used to have one. I gave it away to somebody when I moved. But you can like walk around with your little thing, and you can get all these little sections, you're not going to be able to reach everything. You're still going to have to, sweep certain areas. When you blow stuff off, it's releasing airborne particles. When you cut anything, it's releasing airborne particles. To me, the least of my concerns personally is sweeping up some piles of dust that are on my floor to then, vacuum them up. I would much rather vacuum them up. And then that's the other thing. When you vacuum them up, it's still going to go through your dust collector, and some stuff is going to escape, which is then going to go back into the air. So there's no way to get everything perfect. But you can definitely do things to make a big difference, as opposed to like when I first started, or when anybody else first started, and you're sitting there running boards through a planer and all of the dust is just shooting out the back, creating this massive pile that you have to stop and clean up your shop 6 times during one day in the workshop just while you're building something. Is where now I can work for 5 or 6 days straight and go around and sweep up my shop if I needed to, and have a pile that, might be this big, and then go around with my compressed air and kind of blow off some of the surfaces and open up my garage door and let all that stuff escape. So it'll constantly get better, but the thoughts of trying to achieve this perfect shop dust collection is just, it's very, very difficult unless you're going to spend a ton of money. Maurice Pettiford. Hello, Maurice. Wagyu beef is awesome. Enjoy. Hopefully it will be good. Al, any peculiarities with the new TSC 55 KEB that you have noticed? I'm actually really surprised that this is the first question that I've gotten about it. Alma, hello. You're a mess, Bent. Clean it up. And Alma, I totally forgot. I was with Sedge today, and I completely forgot to talk to him. Maybe I'll just make it a surprise. Okay. Al, any particular or any peculiarities with the TSC? So if you guys haven't seen, if you don't follow me on Instagram, then you probably haven't seen this yet. This right here is the new TSC 55 KEB. This is the new track saw that is coming out on June 15th. I'm pretty sure you can pre-order it right now, but I'm not 100%. As you can see, it is a battery operated, and it does have, as you can see right here, the kickback stop feature right there. So think saw stop technology, but not having a cartridge or damaging your blade when it's activated, for those of you that haven't seen it. So Festool does already have a battery operated track saw, the TSC 55. This is replacing the TSC 55. The TSC 55 will no longer be available. You still might be able to buy it for a little while, but it will no longer be produced. This is the one that's replacing it. So they sent this to me and asked me if I could start testing it out and using it and sharing my thoughts with all of you guys, and I have. I have been, and I've been doing some really interesting tests. Do I see any peculiarities, Al? No, none whatsoever. And I will be completely upfront and honest with you right now. If there's any one Festool track saw that I think you should own, it is this, the TSC 55K. I am extremely impressed. Recently, I've started to become a big fan of battery-powered stuff. I was never a fan of it before. But, I'm so heavily invested in the Festool system, and I've started to get a lot of their tools. A really good example, this right here is the Carvex. This is the power cord operated one, and I am direly trying to find a battery operated one so I can get rid of this and switch to the battery. But I really like it. That's the one tool system that I have with batteries. This track saw is absolutely phenomenal. The biggest difference is, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see it, probably not. So there's 2 gigantic differences with this saw over the last one. The first one is the fact that it does not have a riving knife anymore. Okay, so if you look, you'll see this little piece right here. This is the kickback stop device, right? So essentially the way this works is this is sitting on the track. It'll probably make more sense if I do it this way. This is sitting on the track, just like this. As you're going down, or say you plunge into something too fast, if this kicks up and this comes out at all, it activates the kickback stop, which all that means is it stops the blade instantaneously. So it does not create a kickback, it just stops the blade. 2 seconds later, you can go right back to cutting like you were. The other thing about that is that you'll notice it is not in line with the blade. There is no riving knife anymore. See, I don't know, I'm kind of at the wrong angle. Nope, need to go this way. There we go. So it's no longer in line with the blade because there is no riving knife, right? So some people might say, well, that's an irregularity. It's not, right? They just took the riving knife off and put this anti-kickback device on there. Now, the second big difference, other than that, if you're looking at this sitting right next to the TSC 55, or if you're looking at it next to the TS 55 REQ, the cord operated one, they look identical, right? There's no major differences. This has a brushless motor. The TS 55 does not. The TSC did have the brushless motor. That motor is different than the corded one. The second biggest difference, and this is the biggest difference in my opinion in the saw, is that, let's see if, I don't know if it's going to pick it up, is a thinner kerf blade. So this blade right here is the new blade, which is a thinner kerf. This blade right here is the original blade, which is the original kerf. The original kerf is 2.2 millimeters. The thinner kerf blade is 1.8 millimeters. And when I tell you that it is a remarkable difference between the two, it is unbelievable. And here's the test that I just recently did. And you're not going to be able to see much, and I'm going to be posting about this here soon. I'm going to do a video on all this, and I actually plan on releasing a video today on this, but there's other tests that I want to do before I release that video. I just think it's the right thing to do. So I was like, what can I do to test what I think, or to test some ideas that I have in my head? Like, let's put these thin kerf blades to the test on a battery-operated platform and really see how it goes. So I was looking around my shop and I'm like, well, what do I have here that's extremely hard and extremely thick? And I have 8/4 Babinga, which is the hardest wood I have ever worked with in my shop, at least. So I took a piece about 36 inches long, right, as you can see here, and I decided I was going to cut some strips. And so the test that I did is I cut these thin strips. You can see them right here. I cut these thin strips about, I don't know, 3 millimeters thick. And I used the stock fine tooth blade, which the stock blade that comes with any TS55 model, I don't care if you get the battery operated one or the corded one, is meant for cross cutting, plywood specifically, right? It is a fine tooth cross cutting blade. And I said, you know what? I also have a ripping blade. The ripping blade is in there. They sent a ripping blade and they sent the blade that comes on the machine. And I said, here's the test that I'm going to do. I'm going to try to cut 8/4 Babinga, and this Babinga is, I'll tell you exactly how thick it is. After I milled it down, it is 1 7/8 inches, so it's just under 2 inches. So almost true 8/4. So the test that I did, I said, okay, I'm going to cut it with the fine tooth blade first, and I'm going to make 2 cuts with the fine tooth blade. I'm going to make the first cut, I'm going to do in 2 passes. I'm going to cut 1 inch, and then I'm going to cut the remaining. And I want to see how the machine, if it bogs down, I want to see if it can handle the cut. 1 inch, go through it, no problem. Finish the last 7/8, no problem. Then I switched it to a full pass, so 1 7/8 inches cut with the fine tooth blade, and it cut through it, no problem, no burning, ultra clean. I mean, just really, really impressive. Then I switched over to the ripping blade, which is what the ripping blade is designed for. And I don't even know why I wasted my time doing the inch deep and then the inch and 7/8. But I did, right? Because I wanted to make it exactly the same as the previous test. Cut through it, no problem. Put the whole thing through, make the cut, no problem. I don't even remember hearing any kind of bog down whatsoever. It cuts straight through the wood, no issues at all. Then I said to myself, so these are the 4 strips that I cut. You can't even see any of the saw marks except for very, very slightly. You probably won't even be able to pick it up on this. Yeah, you can't even, you can kind of see it. Very, very, very slight with the ripping blade. But I mean, these things are super smooth, right? Well, then I decided I was going to do the same test with the TS55 plugged in. So the original plugged in model, the TS55 REQ, hooked up to my dust collection, all this other stuff. And that's another thing I was testing is different. I tried one cut with the bag. I tried one cut with the bag without putting down the splinter guard. Then I tried one with the splinter guard. That's the next big test is like dust collection and battery power. But anyways, that's a whole other conversation. So then I went to the TS55 with the full curve blades and I conducted the same exact test. Only this time I didn't try to do it in 2 passes. I just tried to do it in 1 pass. The first pass with the fine cross cut blade, I did that first. I made it this far into my cut and it was barely moving and I could smell it burning the wood. To be fair, the blade that I used was not brand new, basically, the way that this blade was. So, you know, I have to say that. It wasn't brand new. However, I've tried to cut Babinga with my TS55 before. I've also tried to cut 8/4 walnut in 1 pass with my TS55 and overheated the motor. And walnut is far less hard than Babinga, and that is exactly why I bought the TS75 is because of that day with the walnut. But that's how far I made it. Burned up the wood, really, really good. And so I just stopped the cut, and then I switched to the ripping blade. And this one you can see the saw marks a little bit more. It feels a little bit more rough. Funny thing is I can feel this side. This is the side that I cut with the TS55 with the rip, and the ripping blade is new on the TS55. It's a full kerf Festool ripping blade for the TS55. It cut it no problems. It bogged down just a little bit, and I filmed all of this, so you guys will see all this footage. But what's funny is if I go to the other side of this, let's see. You could probably hear it. I got my microphone up here, right? So you can hear there's quite a bit of texture on that side. This is the side that was cut with the ripping blade that was the thinner curve. Pretty dramatically different. Like this has this nice sheen to it. This side has this very dull look to it. So I know that that's not a super scientific test. I just think it's funny and I think it's cool. So I go through all of that to tell you that if this saw is capable of that, personally, for me, I don't cut anything over 2 inches. Almost, I don't do slab work. I don't do anything like that. If you don't make cuts over 2 inches deep, or 2 1/8 roughly, 55 millimeters, if you're not making cuts over 2 inches, the best track saw that you can buy from Festool right now, in my opinion, is the new TSC-K. And I know that like a lot of other questions have probably popped up while I was talking about this, and I will still answer those. But it is very, very impressive. And so just to give you guys an idea of some of the other tests that I'm going to do, one of the tests I want to do, I'm going to go buy a sheet of 3/4 inch ply. I'll just find like the cheapest I can find. I might even do it with like MDF just because that's the cheapest. And I think it's going to cut just the same. I'm going to get a 4x8 sheet and I'm going to cut, you know, like 10 millimeter strips all the way across. And I want to see how many full length 8-foot cuts on 3/4 inch material I can get with brand new batteries. just to give you an idea of how long the batteries are going to last. Now, in reality, are you ever going to do that? Probably not. That's a lot of cuts, but I just want to have an idea. Like, is it going to last me a full day in my shop without having to change the batteries? I'll tell you right now, yes, it's going to. There's never going to be a situation where I'm probably going to kill those batteries. That's one other test I'm going to do. And then I want to do some more tests with the dust collection. The dust collection is better with the hose, obviously. But the dust collection at the same time is really good depending on what blade you're using and if you're using the splinter guard and all that stuff. So with the bag. But the bag does fill up really quick. And when the bag fills up, it just shoots dust everywhere, which is what happened to me with the Babinga using the ripping blade. So I got more tests to come, but my initial reactions are this thing is phenomenal. And then the simple fact that as the kickback stop is just one extra benefit. Okay. Reef GC responded again as clearly the chips isn't what's that bad for you, not to critique. I wish I had your setup. I wasn't thinking of as you was critiquing. No worries. Gary, when will you be building the Capex dust hood? I don't know when I'm going to do that. I want to rebuild the miter saw station here sometime soon, but I have to figure out what I'm going to do because this is here. So I'm going to be kind of limited as to what kind of dust hood I could build for that. So still trying to figure that out. Have you seen Festool as a patent? A trackless, have you see Festool has patented a trackless track saw as well as a saw stop miter saw. I have not heard anything about that. Al, I should be getting my KEB around June 15th. No, you can't have my cordless Carvex. Regina. Oh, Regina, if you're still in here, do you have a nail gun preference? Hold that thought. I want to show you something. So, Regina is a friend of ours from Germany. I know I'm not on the camera right now, but she is a friend of ours from Germany, and her husband and I were in the same unit. He is now retired. But she asked me if I could make a cutting board or charcuterie board. And I have, and Regina, I'm going to show it to you. I haven't sent it out in the mail yet, but it is done. And here it is. So I said yes, one, because she's our friend and we love her. But the other reason is because it gave me an opportunity to practice different things that I wanted to do on the CNC machine. One of which utilizing it to cut out the shape of the cutting board, also to cut the juice groove, and then on the back, we put their name on it, Bailey. So Regina, it is done. I'm not going to lie, I kind of want to keep it, but it will be coming out to you here very soon. But that was a fun project for me because, like I said, I really need to get more serious about the CNC. And this is just something simple, but it really gave me an opportunity to learn quite a bit about using the CNC, and things are starting to become second nature to me. So plan on seeing that here a lot more in the very near future. What time is it? All right, we are at 20:10. That is 8:10, and I don't have any other questions. No, you can't keep it. I won't keep it. To answer your question, nail gun preference, all of the nail guns I use are Grex. I like Grex. They're a little bit more expensive. I just think they make fantastic pneumatic nailers. I've used Hitachi, Porter Cable, all that stuff. Every other nail gun I have used, I have had jams, misfires. Some guns are much worse than others. With the Grex, I have the 23 gauge pinless and the 18 gauge, and I'm about to buy the narrow crown stapler as well. And I have never once, and this is not an exaggeration, I have never once had a misfire, a jam, or anything with the Grex. Not one time. So you can buy one for, 80, but I don't know how much the less expensive ones cost. Spend 80 or 100 bucks on a DeWalt or something like that, or you can spend another $80 or so and get a Grex. And personally, I just think the Grex, I've never spoken to them. They've never given me anything. They have no idea I even exist in this world, but they are just absolutely phenomenal. And they're Festool green. So of course they're going to be great and more expensive. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, Regina, if you want, I can send you a link to what I'm talking about. I'll shoot it to you over on Facebook. It depends on which one you want. If you just want like a brad nailer, then an 18 gauge would be the way to go. If you're looking for a pin nailer, 23 gauge would be the way to go. 18 and 23 are probably the most common that we would use in woodworking or trim work or anything like that. I want to get a narrow crown stapler for cabinet construction, right? Just to staple things together real quick and then screw it together. It's more of a want. It's definitely not a need. I can just use my brad nailer and do the same thing. But anyway, great to see you back. Thank you, Ashley. It's good to be back. I appreciate everybody jumping on here to watch. I don't have any other questions, so I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. I'm going to go inside and hang out with my wife and maybe watch an episode of, what are we watching right now? God, well, my memory is really starting to go. Homeland. We started the whole series again. It was really good. Anyways, I've been nursing this beer long enough. So I hope all you guys have a great night. And I will see you all on live on here on YouTube in 2 weeks. I'm getting back on my routine. I'll do a live tonight, release a video next week, do a live the following week. And I'm going to start jumping on and doing lives on Instagram again here soon with some other people. So, oh, and one more thing before I go. This is a big announcement. I got 63 people watching now. First thing is, I was on a podcast recently called The Military Makers, a group of a bunch of vets, great guys. They only bring other vets on to talk about woodworking or social media or business and all those other things. Episode 1 was released last Sunday. Episode 2 is coming out tomorrow, unless you're on Patreon for them, and then it came out today. The episode I was on was like 2.5 hours, so they split up into 2 parts. That's the first part. So definitely go check out Military Makers on Instagram, all this other stuff. It was a really good time. And anybody that's a vet will appreciate the conversation for sure. The other thing is, I haven't really talked about this much, but I'm going to be starting a podcast here very soon. And you guys are the first to hear it officially with 2 friends of mine, and I'm really excited about it. So that podcast, we've been talking about it for years, but we are ready to go ahead and start doing it. So be on the lookout for that. Anyways, hope you guys have a great night, and I will see you soon.